Hi everyone, I'm Good Patriot. Yesterday I had the pleasure of sitting down with two legends of the gun community. Stephen Willeford, the man who engaged an active shooter who had just gone into a small town church in Sutherland Springs, Texas and killed 26 people. Stephen courageously pursued the killer with his AR-15, showing the world that we need more good guys with guns. We were also joined by Jack Wilson, the man who recently took down the church shooter in White Settlement, Texas. With years of training and his concealed carry pistol ready, he was able to take down the killer within a few short seconds using one very skilled shot. Let's learn from these men as we talk about the importance of training, what it's like to actually be in the moment where you have to pull the trigger, and what they would say to anti-gun politician Michael Bloomberg if given the chance. Enjoy. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for letting me interview you today. We have Stephen Willeford and Jack Wilson, and let's get into it right off the bat. I want to know, if Michael Bloomberg was sitting right here in front of us right now, what would you want to say to that man, given the fact that he doesn't think that the average American citizen should ever be carrying a gun in public?
Given his, Mr. Bloomberg's statement after, the shooting that occurred on December 29th, 2019, if his position was in effect at that time and no one was allowed to carry, the carnage that happened that day would have been significantly greater, given the fact that the individual did have, 7 more rounds in his shotgun and 3 more in his pocket, both, slugs and buckshot. So had he, if we were in his arena, then the carnage, like I said, would have been much, much, much greater than just the loss of Richard and Tony, which is way too much as it is. But the individual had prior arrest with a shotgun in New Jersey. He had prior, issues with law enforcement on multiple occasions. And even though the police department arrived in 2 minutes after the event was taken down, even that 2 minutes would have been way too long to prevent, the additional carnage that he could have inflicted had we not been able to carry, as volunteer security members of the church team, and to be able to protect the members of the church and family members also.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, what would you want to say to him?
I would like to ask Mr. Bloomberg if he has armed security around him, because I kind of think he probably does.
I kind of think so too.
And I'd like to remind him that we are just as important as he is, that our families are more important to us than he is. Yet he has armed security around him. And in Sutherland Springs, the police were 5 to 7 minutes behind me. And the shooter had multiple loaded magazines and guns in his vehicle. And my community could not have waited another 5 to 7 minutes. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Bloomberg, if your family would have been sitting in the pews, would you have really cared what I stopped the shooter with, or who stopped the shooter? Mm-hmm. And I guess that's the most important for Mr. Bloomberg. Who stopped the shooter? Would you care who stopped the shooter if it was your family that was in the shooter's sights next?
Right, good point. So every concealed carry permit holder that carries a gun in public wants to know, what is it like when you actually engage a shooter? We can't prepare enough, but we can prepare. But what was going on in your head and what was going on with your body the moment that you actually had to draw your gun and shoot somebody?
I can tell you that it was the strangest sensation in my life, because the shooter had been shooting already. And I'm not going to lie, I was terrified. But at the same time, I was dead calm. I cannot believe the calm that you experience it too. Yep. I was absolutely terrified, and I was dead calm. And you can't say that without somebody saying, how can you be both? I can tell you that it can happen. And I truly believe that the Holy Spirit was over me at that moment, protecting me and speaking to me. I actually think I heard God's voice that day. When he was shooting at me, I was told, don't worry about those shots, do what I sent you here to do. And I was completely focused and thinking more clearly than I had ever thought before in my life. And I felt no hatred or anything. I just felt resolved. I was resolved to stopping what was happening.
Jack, what about you?
The event was so quick. We were, as I've stated, we were watching the individual, we were aware of the individual. He turned, with the gun, as we, Richard and I were both drawing our weapons. He shot Richard. I knew immediately that there had to be, something done immediately as he was shooting, as he turned and shot Tony. Then I knew that I had to take the shot whenever I got a sufficient shot. That's where my previous training and practice and training and practice and training and practice and then more training and practice comes into play. There was instinctive reaction immediately upon him turning with the firearm in his hand to know that I had to take immediate action to protect not only my church family but my relation family that was in attendance there, and to take out evil.
Along with that training that's so necessary to have that calmness in the moment, what do you think of concealed carry holders that carry out in public but they never train? What would you say to those people?
I would say that the more guns out there in the public, there are more good guys and women with more good guys than there are bad guys. I would say that if you want to carry and you don't train, I would say you're doing yourself a disservice, number one. But I would stand up for your right to do so. But I don't think that you would be prepared to take on an active shooter. You can protect yourself maybe, you can protect the person next to you, but I don't think you are prepared to take on an active shooter. I also would say you better be a great marksman, like the man next to me, because dying in a gunfight is not the worst thing that can happen. And what I mean by that is I don't want to be responsible for taking a shot at a bad guy, missing, and killing someone that's innocent. I would rather die myself than to take that responsibility on, because I'm there to protect the innocent. I'm not there to destroy the innocent. I'm not there to necessarily destroy the bad guy, but I am there to stop the bad guy.
Keyword.
And you better be, if you are taking the responsibility of carrying a gun, your name is on every bullet you pull the trigger on. And 6 out of 6 shots that I shot at the shooter at Sutherland Springs can be accounted for on the shooter. He had on Class 3 body armor, and I had quite a challenge getting through that. And he was shooting at me. But 6 out of 6 shots, I was on target 6 out of 6 times. And my neighbor that witnessed it said, I couldn't believe how methodical you were and how selective you were at your shots. He said, I expected you to open up. If you don't train, you won't have that ability.
One of the things, having been a CHL/LTC instructor since the program began in 1995, our thrust is to get people to understand that passing the course of fire that the state requires to get your license issued, the proficiency part of it, is the beginning. It's not the end of the process. You must continually train, you must continually practice, you must work at not just shooting static, because if you're ever involved in a real life shooting scenario where you're trying to protect yourself, family members, or even anybody else in a life or death situation in accordance with Chapter 9 of the Penal Code, you run the risk of possibly hitting an innocent, person, and then that makes you, again, you're responsible for that action. You have to be proficient in your ability and your shooting skills. If you're going to wear a gun, you need to be proficient with it. And in my opinion, if you're not proficient with it, you also may be able, as Stephen said, be able to protect yourself or your family, but you also are doing a disservice to the populace as a whole, because if you were ever called on to be put in the position as we have been put in, you may, not be as proficient and be able to take out, the bad threat or the evil threat. And other people may be injured or killed by your inactions because you did not practice and you did not train.
I want to point out also, and I've said this several times before, qualification is the bare minimum acceptable
True.
for a license.
Right.
So if you're at the bare minimum acceptable, and a police officer said that to me once before, he said, I qualified to carry an AR-15 in my squad car. I couldn't do what you just did. I said, qualification is the bare minimum acceptable. That doesn't mean that's the bottom line where you should be. That just means that's the bottom line where they will accept you.
True.
Qualification is, like Jack said, a start. It's
Right.
not the finish. It's a start. You better be better than qualification.
All this talk about concealed carry, would you guys mind showing us what you're carrying today? I know, I'll show you mine.
I'm going to be really careful.
Really careful. We got the Kimber Micro 9 with backup magazine. Stephen, what do you got there?
I've got and as everybody can see, chamber side open, locked back. I've got an old Kimber, and I've carried it for 20 odd years. It's my best friend. Besides my wife. My wife's my best friend. And she's my backup too, by the way. It's a Ultra CDP. It comes from the Kimber Custom Shop. It's a 45 ACP. It's 3-inch barrel, aluminum frame, so it makes it light enough for carry purposes, and absolutely a tack driver for what it is, for a carry pistol. It's about a $1,200 pistol. They say, how can you carry such an expensive pistol? And I'm going to say, if you go to Vegas and you're going to bet your life on something, and you're going to roll the dice, and the more you spend, the better your chances of living are. And that's not necessarily the case, but I wouldn't go cheap. I'm betting my life, and whatever you carry, you better be willing to bet your life on it. And I used to compete with this particular pistol in competition, and people used to make fun of me because I shot a 3-inch barrel 45 in competition, and I said, I don't care whether I win this competition or not. What I care about is whether I can shoot the gun that I carry every day or not.
Right.
And I got first place trophies and stuff on a little mantle at the house that I won with a 3-inch barrel, so.
Well done. Jack, what about you?
Currently, I'm carrying one of my 4 SIG P229s in 357 SIG. At this time, the Texas Rangers, who are still completing their investigation, has the one that my SIG P229 Dark Elite with a Barstow 357 SIG barrel in it. This particular gun here was the one that I first purchased in 1995, and it is not as stock as it was when it came from the factory, because I have done what's called a meltdown and I actually rounded all of the edges left it raw silver, the stainless finish on it, and, rounded the edges, and it does have the SIG short trigger in it. Magazine release is adjustable from either side. So I'm comfortable with this gun. I have Hogue grips on it, finger groove with SIG night sights on it, and a Barstow barrel in it. And I like the Barstow barrels because they do afford a little bit better accuracy, and I'm comfortable with how the gun performs. I pick it up, I know what it's going to do each and every time. And as I previously stated, I have 4 of these in my possession. And so it is my gun of choice.
Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing today. In closing, final question is, how can we pray for you going forward?
How can you pray for me? Pray for peace for me. Pray for humility, because a lot of people try to make me more than what I am. I'm just God's servant, and that's all I am. I'm just a man. I'm fallible. So peace, humility, and as I go and speak about Second Amendment rights, safety and security from the other side.
Continue the prayers for Richard and Tony, family, all of the members of the church who had to witness that tragic event. And as I've previously stated, I do not consider myself a hero. I consider myself a protector. And that's what I was doing that day. That's what I will continue to do. And I pray for your prayers in that regard, because it is a constant daily effort for every one of us to get through the day, and hopefully that evil does not arise again, and hopefully we're never put in this position. That was a hope that I never had hoped would be put in that position, but if you are put in that position, you have to be capable and ready to immediately take action to stop it. Otherwise, the carnage after the fact, the carnage that happened at Sutherland Springs and what could have happened at West Freeway Church of Christ would have been significantly greater had we not had the privilege and the right to be able to carry, and have our weapons there to protect our members and our family.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.